This is actually a full course in this video. It's laid out for beginners. It's actually called Acrylic Painting for Total Beginners. Please save it. Make sure you know how to come back to it later. If you do want to take it on our site, I'll drop the link in, and that might be easier for some of you to keep track of where you are. It's free. It's kind of laid out a little bit different. This is one really long video. But anyways, it's for you if you're a beginner or just kind of figuring out where you're going or coming back into art after a long absence. This is for you. I hope you find it helpful. I'm just going to skip right into the supply section. I'm not going to give you the list of everything that you possibly could have, but just the things that I think are super helpful in your creative journey, especially when you're starting out trying to paint in acrylics. I want you to know that I believe in you, and I hope that this video is helpful for you guys. We'll see you later. While acrylics are less expensive than oil paint, it's still great to get the most for your money. The truth is, you really don't need that many colors. What I recommend is simply to purchase a yellow, a red, and a blue, plus white and black. With those few pigments, you can create almost any color that you want to. Now, when you go to the store, you'll notice there's definitely more than one yellow and red and blue. So how do you choose which one to get? As you can see, each combination of different primary colors creates a very nuanced and interesting and beautiful mixture of colors. Is one better than the other? Of course not. It just depends on what you're trying to paint and what colors you like to use. One red makes it easier to mix a strong violet, while another red makes it easier to mix a strong orange. And it's the same for your mixes made with various yellows and various blues. If you don't know where to start, I'd recommend cadmium yellow light, cadmium red, ultramarine blue, titanium white, and Mars black. You can also buy acrylics in heavy body, which is pretty thick, medium or soft body, which is, of course, right in the middle, or fluid acrylics, which are very thin. Heavy body is good for things like palette knife work or anywhere that you want to have good texture, while the thinner fluid acrylics are great for things like washes and glazes. So I'll talk more about glazing later. You really don't have to worry about that right now. Personally, I almost always use heavy body, and that's what I'll be using in this course. You'll also notice that different brands of paint have student grade paint and artist grade paint. What's the difference? Really, it comes down to the amount of binder in the paint versus the amount of pigment in the paint. Artist grade paint has a lot more pigment, therefore it covers better. So I always would recommend getting artist grade paint. However, if you can't afford artist grade paint across the board, the two colors that you really absolutely need artist grade paint are titanium white and any yellow that you use. Cadmium yellow does not cover at all in student grade paint, so you need it to be artist grade paint or you will end up frustrated. And what are you going to paint on? Acrylics can stick to just about anything, so you have a lot of options. The most popular, of course, is canvas. It usually comes mounted like this, and it's quite versatile. It also can come mounted on a panel, and it will almost always be pre-gessoed. If you want to gesso it yourself, you have the flexibility to paint on something like MDF or other surfaces. What is gesso? Essentially, it is an acrylic primer that prepares your surface for painting. Like I said, most canvases that you buy in a store will already have gesso applied, so you really don't need to buy gesso yourself unless you're planning to paint on something like wood or MDF. Another inexpensive option for painting, especially when you're starting out, would be a canvas pad. You can see that it is multiple sheets that are kind of bound together, and this is a great surface to learn on. You don't have to feel pressure, and it's going to be less expensive than normal canvases. This is also what I'm going to be using for the demonstrations later in this course. Now, when it comes to brushes, the main thing you want to make sure you do is get synthetic brushes. You do not want to use natural hair brushes with acrylic paints, because when you are cleaning with water, natural hair brushes will soak up the water and it will get all weird and funky. Now, there are quite a few different types of brushes, so I'm going to show you some of them and how you might use them, and I'll also show you my favorites. So my very favorite type of brush to use, and I use it probably 95% of the time in every painting I use it, at least most of the painting, it is a flat brush. And flat brushes are similar to another brush, which is called a bright. I'll show you one of those. But the difference is that a flat brush has longer bristles. Brights are a little bit shorter. Both of them have square edges, but the length of the bristle is really what makes the difference. I don't mind either. I use brights every once in a while, but most of my brushes are flats, and they are, again, what I use primarily. So because they work similarly, I'll just show you what it looks like to use a flat. The reason I like it is because it's so versatile. I can do normal brush strokes, you know, just using it like this. And you can see that it has quite a bit of a straight, you know, kind of flat edge, but I can also do things like this. This is a lot of what I like to do, is figure out different ways, create different edges, have softer transitions, and just be able to do something creative with it. And you can also do things like lines. See how it creates quite a good line. All this coming from one brush. And the last thing that you can do, which is kind of pretty standard, but it can cover quite a bit of ground. So I just added a little bit of water to my paint, and I'll just show you how it will work in some ways a little bit like a wash brush. Like it can cover quite a bit. So anyways, that's my favorite brush. It is a flat brush. It comes in different sizes. You can see that this is a much bigger one. It's a size number 12, and this is size number 6, and that's my favorite. Another pretty common type of brush that you will see is called a filbert brush. Now, filbert is similar in that it's, you know, the size of the bristle is somewhere in the range of a flat. It's not that different, but you can see that it obviously has a rounded tip to it. It has a cousin, and the cousin is called an egbert. I don't know where these names came from, but they both have rounded tops. The egbert, of course, you can tell has a much longer bristle, and the filbert is shorter, but they work similarly. They will create rounded edges, obviously. Like you can see that instead of having the squared off kind of look, this will have more of a rounded look to it. And you can see some of the different examples of how they work. They also can do some straight lines. That is a filbert, and an egbert is going to work quite similar. Another brush is an angle brush. You can see it's also appropriately named, just has that little angle at the end. Now, this is, again, kind of similar to the flat in some of the things that it can do. It can make quite angular type of marks. It also can do some kind of lines, and I suppose it might be able to do some really good dots just because it's got that nice angle. That's again an angle brush. Another that you might find and come across is called a fan brush, also appropriately named. You can see it looks just like the name, and this will create some softer edges and broken lines. You can see how those brush strokes are very soft. I haven't put on it too much paint, so you can see that it's kind of dragging the paint just lightly across the surface, and we can kind of see through the brush strokes. That's what a fan brush can do for you. I'm not sure how it does on a line. We can see it's not quite as defined, but that's what happens if you use it that way. This is a round brush. Now, a round brush, again, is just talking about the shape of the bristles. It's a pretty common brush that you'll see a lot of artists use, and it's going to create, this is a little bit more of a direct approach. It comes in different sizes. I have a very large one here that you'll see will not do the small lines quite as easily, but it can push around quite a bit of paint. So again, it'll give you a different feel. It'll kind of approach things, you know, it'll be a different approach to how you use it. But that is a round brush, and I usually use those somewhere toward the detail part of my painting, like meaning if I need to create some smaller lines. And this is a similar brush, but this one is called a liner. I would probably use this mostly with thin down paint. I don't think it's good to push really heavy bodied paint around, but it is very good at small detailed lines. And you can see, you know, I could sign your name. You can do all sorts of things with this. And again, you can see that I added just a little bit of water to my paint so that it would be able to work with this paintbrush a little bit easier. You can see how fine of a detail. That's a liner. Now, when I wash that brush out, it always makes me remember how important it is that you wash your brushes well and you don't leave them sitting in the bottom of your water for too long, because you really don't want to leave them sitting there at all, because they will get damaged. The bristles will bend, and if they sit for too long, they will remain that way. Hey, if you're here, that means you love art, you want to grow, and I want to help you. Text me right now. Take a minute. 425-400-2094. 425-400-2094. Tell me your name, your goal in your art, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help you succeed. Text me right now. Now let's jump back into this video. The last brush that I'm going to show you is called a mop brush. Like if you were cleaning the floor, that type of mop. Now, what I've seen some people use this for is a nice blend. So I've put a little bit of water in here, and I'm going to show you kind of what I might do. And I'm going to cover some of this up, so just have to remember a little bit of what we had here. But this is the type of thing that you can do with a mop brush. You can see that it's going to create a nice transition for us, and really we can just kind of paint from one color to the other and cover quite a bit of this surface with this. But that's an example. Now this could be smoothed out quite a bit more, and if we wanted or had another brush that was clean and dry, you could come over the top of that and you could do more of the smoothing out of that. Anyways, I hope that was helpful. You can try whatever brush you want. I would just recommend, if you see something that you like, buy one and see how it works, because you might like it, you might not like it as much as you think. So maybe just try it out and then get different sizes if you want to after that. My favorite again is the flats. They're versatile, but you can choose whatever paintbrush that you think will work for you. And what about your palette? While you could paint on anything from a paper plate to glass, I recommend something called the Masterson Stay Wet palette. Now the Masterson palette comes in different sizes. This is a 12 by 16. This is a smaller one called a handy palette. It has a lid so that it can be sealed and keep your paints wet on the inside. It also comes with a special type of paper that soaks water through and yet doesn't really deteriorate. It won't fall apart like a normal piece of paper would. Underneath there is a sponge which you can wet with water, and when your paper is saturated, it will soak up the water from the sponge and keep your paints wet for a much longer time than if it was just sitting out in the open air with no moisture underneath. How should you organize your palette? Every artist has their own preference, and what really matters is that it makes sense to you and that you know it. But if you'd like my advice, this is what I would recommend. So when I'm organizing my palette with a primary palette, a limited palette like I suggested in this video, I do it with color theory in mind. It's all about mixing colors. So I want to think about my yellow and my red and my blue and all the mixtures in between, and I want to be able to visualize them and see them. And when I create a palette and I lay out my paints in a palette, I would like to be able to know that if I mix my yellow with my blue, it's going to create this kind of green. If I add a little bit of black or a little bit of white to it, it will be somewhere in this range. So when I put my palette out, I want to think about it in that same way. I'm going to put my yellow in a corner, my red in a corner, my blue in a corner, and I'm going to mix my secondary colors in between. I put black right here and a double dose of white in the corner because I always seem to use about twice as much white because I'm mixing it in with all of the other colors. Now to start with, we're going to simplify it even more by just having white and black on our palette for the first few exercises, and we'll move into color a little bit later on. There are a few other items to help you in acrylic painting. Some are optional, some are not. One thing that is not really optional is you need a container that has some water in it. You're going to be cleaning your brushes out, and to have clean water is very important. I often have two containers so that I can have dirty water and then a cleaner water and mix them or wash out my brushes in both. And these don't have to be anything special. You can see this is just an old Cool Whip container, so anything like that will work for you. Second thing that I think is essential is paper towel. Some type of rag or paper towel makes it so that you can wipe off your brushes, get them dry before you're grabbing more paint. You can also do different things, clean your hands, wipe off portions of paint off of your painting if you need to. Super helpful to have. A palette knife is not totally essential, but it can be quite helpful if you are ever wanting to move paint around on your palette, scrape things off, or mix larger piles of paint. This is a very good and helpful tool to have. Moving into more of an optional tool is something like this. This is a spray bottle. You may or may not want one of these, but I find it to be helpful when I want to keep a surface wet or spray my palette and keep my paints wet. It's a nice fine spray misting bottle. You can get a more generic kind that will spray as well. It will just have larger droplets. So I like this fine spray bottle. Another optional item is a hair dryer. This is going to help you speed up your drying times, but of course you don't have to have it. It's just whether you're patient enough to wait for it or not. And the final thing that I think is absolutely essential for painting is music. Now, you may not be like me, but I love listening to music when I paint, so that's what I recommend. Now, if you want to get any more detailed information on the Masterson palette, that is going to be in a video down below this, but that's your essential supplies, you guys. It's hopefully going to help you feel like you know what you need and not be in the store tempted to buy a bunch of things that are unnecessary or not really going to be able to help you learn the basics and being creative in your process of painting. All right, so in this section, we're going to learn a little bit about how to create a few edges and variety with brush strokes, with maybe smudging with our fingers, with layering thin washes over the top of thicker paint, all sorts of stuff that will be helpful for you as you're learning how to use a brush and as you're learning how to create edges that will help carry the eye through the painting and just have a variety inside of what you're doing. If you hear a term that you're not really familiar with, like glazing or something like that, don't worry about it. Hopefully it'll get explained in more detail to you, but just know that some of this stuff it's quite simple. These exercises are quite simple, but they're going to be really helpful for you as you are learning how to use paint and use your brushes and put it down and apply it. There's quite a few different techniques here that we'll be looking at, so let's jump into it. So I'm about to get this paper set up here, and I just want to say I did take it out of this canvas pad, and the first one that I tried to take out, you can see got a little bit cut off, ripped right there, and so that made me realize that you do have to be a little bit careful. I'm going to tape it down around the edges. Now you don't have to do this. You could just paint, I believe, straight out of the pad. You don't have to take it out or tape it down or anything, but I thought I would do it. Like I mentioned, my plan is simply to use black and white this first exercise and the first couple exercises. And the reason for that is because it will help us understand, without worrying about color, just how to use the paint and how to mix variations of shades and just use the paint in a very simple way without getting all the complexities of how to mix color involved. All we're worried about is how light or dark is the paint mixture that we're making. This first exercise is going to be quite simple and straightforward. We're going to take a flat, or you can take whatever brush you have. I've got my flat, it's a number 10, and I'm going to start with my dark and I'm going to mix toward my light, and I'm just going to simply make a gradation of color, or a gradation of value really in this case. So we'll put on the darkest color here, and I'm just going to simply start mixing in some of the white. And I probably grabbed more than I really needed to here of the white. So I'll just going to keep trying to change this little by little, and then hopefully by the time we get to the other side, it will be completely white. And in the middle, hopefully also we're getting more of a neutral gray that will be right in the middle of the value range, and getting it to be a little bit lighter. So just simply just adding more and more white to the mix. I'm not really cleaning my brush out, although here at the very end, if we want to get that to be as light as the white can be, you can definitely grab another brush or wash yours out. Guys, look at this. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but you just created a gradation. And this is an important thing for being able to create nuanced paintings and understanding values. This is the value range. You have from very, very dark, and in this case, it's just a pure black, to a very, very light. This is white, and everything in between is going to be just along this same value range. Now, black and white is simple to understand. Where you need to understand, this is the same. If we started mixing color, every color will land on this value range somewhere. So understanding values is a very important concept, and I just want to congratulate you on getting your first exercise done. Okay, to make it a little bit easier on myself, I am mixing up an actual neutral gray here, so that I have a little bit more room to do my mixes and things like that. But I also wanted to mention that if you're mixing half black and half white, what you'll find is that the black is a little bit stronger, and it will make the mix of gray darker than kind of the mid gray that I was going for. So I actually just mixed in a little bit more white. And what I want you to do is create a 3-value scale right here. We're just going to have the black, a mid-tone, and you can put down a little bit of white. And what I'm going to show you when this is dry is I'm going to show you how another way that you can kind of, without blending wet into wet, you can create a softer transition between these strong value changes by putting side by side values. And this will make more sense when I come back in just a minute here, but I'm going to dry this and I'll be right back. So your first job is to get the 3 values of white, gray, and black onto this and keep them distinct. Don't have any blending in between those. We want to see the contrast. So if you need to take a minute to do that, you can at this point. But if you're ready to move on, we'll just keep going. So I'm going to grab a smaller brush right now. And what I want to do is I'm thinking about, okay, we know that we can blend wet colors into wet colors, and we could create a gradation that way, and it's a soft blend, but we can also do the optical type of blending, where what if we took the color and the value that was in between these and just put it next to this, just right there. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to grab some of my neutral gray and I'm going to mix in some white. Now we know it takes a little bit more white than gray than the black, so I did mix in a little bit more white. And I'm going to just lay this down right next to this. Not trying to blend it or create any soft edge, but I am trying to soften the transition between these. Now I'm going to clean out my brush. I'm not going to get water, but I'm going to just grab this, and this is a mixing a little bit more white into this, and I'm going to do that same thing one more time right here. I'm going to lay it right down next to this other one. Okay, and you see how that is now, we're starting to get softer and softer transition. Now I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to grab, it's good, just try to keep your mixes distinct so that you can tell where you're getting something from. But if we do that one more time, we'll put it right next to the other one. And do you see how soft that transition is now? It's going from white to a very light gray to a little bit darker to the neutral. Now we could do it the other way also, where we would continually find smaller transitional colors in their mixes. But the main point is you could do this all the way down, but what I just want you to know is that there are different ways of getting from one value to the next value and creating softer transitions. And one is to blend wet into wet. One is to put and lay a color or a value next to another one that is going to help transition and create a softer illusion. It's actually a hard edge there still, but it's a softer illusion. And that's the kind of thing that you can do later in your actual paintings that will help your eye transition from one part of a scene to another part of the scene. And we'll talk more about that later, but good job. Second exercise is done. Another way to create a transition between values or colors would be with another type of optical blend, and that would be called dry brushing. So what you want to do is get a brush that will be like a flat, fairly good size like this is fine. You can use pretty much any size, but you don't want to have too much paint on your brush. But I'm going to start over here with the color as it will be like as strong and opaque as possible. And then as it comes over here, I'm just going to work on using my brush in a softer way, kind of light strokes to make it a broken edge. It's going to hopefully, let me just dry it off a little bit more. If you have too much moisture in your brush, it doesn't work too well. And this is, again, like you can think of different ways maybe to use your brush strokes, like different angles, things like that. But it's not as blended as this generally, It's not as clean as this, but in certain cases you can really create a nice effect with a soft dry brush kind of way of approaching this. And there are, you know, potentially like things like if you had the tree leaves going up into a sky or something like that, where that kind of approach might be the very best one for you. Now you can also do that coming back into this with a lighter color like this white. It could also work the same way. And I'm going to show you one other thing with this that is a potential as you're doing it, because you don't always just have to use your brush. You can also do something like this with your finger, or potentially a rag or paper towel. And again, you can see how by rubbing off a little bit of this, we're able to create a transition here and create a very kind of nice soft edge. So again, two different ways of accomplishing a similar feel. One, just simply using the brush and trying to use just a little bit to dry brush. The other would be more like smudging, but removing little bits of the edges of that transitional color and or to create a softer transition. But again, useful things for me. I do smudge quite a bit. If you don't want to get paint on your fingers, of course you could wear gloves, or you could use something like a paper towel or a rag to just do it for you. But again, another way to create nice transitions and soft transitions between colors. Hey, my bad, don't want to interrupt too much, but hey, text me right now, 425-400-2094, 425-400-2094, and tell me your name, tell me your goal in art, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help you succeed. Text me and I'll get back to you. Let's get back to the video. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is actually going to be done on this black. I put black all the way across. It's already dry, so if you want to follow along, just make sure that you put black somewhere like this and then let it dry completely. And what I'm going to do is going to be either, the way I'm thinking of it is either you could call it layering, or potentially you could call it glazing. Now, a glaze is when you use a transparent color in a light kind of wash, that means thinned down kind of version of itself to cover over something that is, and it will affect that color that's underneath it. Like, it'll change it a little bit, but it's not going to completely cover it. An opaque color, if we took a opaque color and went over the top of this, we wouldn't see really the black anymore. But a transparent kind of wash or glaze will change it, but we'll still see some of the color that's underneath. Now, the reason I say I'm kind of calling it a glaze is because titanium white is not a transparent white. There is such a thing as transparent white, and that is zinc white. Sometimes you'll see it called mixing white, but zinc white is a transparent white. You can see right here where it was painted over these black lines, but you can still see the black lines. Now, if I did that same thing with titanium white, which I'll do just to show you, we might still see something through, but it's not going to be transparent like this is. You see how we can see so much better than we can see right here, and so this is an opaque white right here. But if we thin it down, the more we thin it down, because I do have a little bit of water in my brush already, but if I thin it down even more, now you could use water. Sometimes is an okay way to thin things down. There is debate over whether, if you put too much water in, what will happen. Now, the reason I say there's debate is because somebody told me that Golden announced that they didn't think that it was going to affect the adhesion of the paint too much. But if you want to use something different, you can buy a glazing medium or something like airbrush medium to thin your paints down. But the point is that you're creating something that is semi-transparent. It's not as opaque as this because it has less pigment now per the volume, because we've thinned it down with either water or some type of medium. And then we can do some layering here. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to put on a little bit of this over the top. And like I said before, it's thin. So when you're glazing, one thing that's helpful to remember, and this is, again, this is kind of a glaze, but sometimes it's good to think it's not so much about the paint that you put on. It's also, like, a big part of glazing is how much paint and what happens to the paint when you take it off. But this, we could say, is the first layer of glaze, right? And we can see how it's changed. It's changed it, right? Now, if I wet my finger, like just a little bit, put a little bit of water on it somehow, and just kind of try to blend that edge. If we do it quickly, we can blend that a little bit. It's a little bit dry right now to get it very good, but we can come back if we're quick, and we can kind of get any kind of soft edge, you know, especially with a paper towel or something like that. But we'll just say that this is our first layer here. Now I'm going to dry this, and we're going to come back and we're going to do another layer on top of this. We're going to see how kind of we can transition this all the way across. Okay, so I'm just going to use the exact same mixture. I'm not changing or adding more white or anything like this, because this is all about layers, right? It's not about adding more white to it. And I'm going to try to keep things moving this direction. I'm not going to keep going over everything, so we can, hopefully we can see the transition more and more. This is pure black. This here has one coat. This is where it starts to have two coats. I'm going to keep drying this. It's going to be over and over again. We're going to do several more coats, and we're just going to work on this gradation through layering or through glazing. Okay, come in here. I'm not going to go all the way over, and we'll do another layer, and I'll soften the edge and come back this way. Starting to see more and more, right? Okay, another layer. Thin, light wash here. And we'll dry it again. Okay, same process every time, same process. Getting lighter and lighter over on the side. Okay, so there you have it. You can see a few different ways of creating a transition between values, transition. This first one, we essentially just went straight across, blended wet into wet. This one, we did transitional colors that made us think that there was a softer transition, but really the actual line in between these is still fairly strong and hard. It's just that the colors are closer in value. In this one, we did dry brush on this side, and we did a little bit more of a smudging effect on this side. And this one, we simply layered. Well, we did do a little bit of smudging also on the edge, but we mostly were just layering on top, and we can see the effect of doing multiple layers. Now, if you were glazing or something like that, there's no need to necessarily do many layers or anything like that. I was just showing you how you can use it and the effect of layers on something like this. So great job. Fourth exercise is done. Okay, friends, we're going to talk about something very important, and that is values. And values is a word that might not mean that much to you if you're not familiar with art, but art talk, values means light and dark, how light is a color and how dark is a color. And there's a whole range in between. But this is one of the most important things that I think you can learn, because it's going to affect everything that you do, and the way that your paintings look in the end. have a better understanding if you know that this color of red correlates somehow to the value scale. And what we're going to do to make this really hopefully stick with you is we're going to look at some information that I can show you and kind of explain it. Then we're going to paint a painting in black and white and gray that will help us understand, okay, here are our lights and our midtones and our darks. And then we're going to take that painting and we're going to paint over it with color. And that will help us understand that these colors kind of correlate with these values, right? So anyways, it will be fun, it will be helpful, and I'm looking forward to it. So let's jump into this presentation part. Okay, so we have something that we call the value scale in art. And if you've never heard of it, it might not make that much sense, but I like to use one that goes from number 1 to number 9. Number 1 would be my white, and number 9 would be black, and right in the middle is value number 5, and value number 5 is neutral gray. That's kind of helpful to know, but what I like to think of it is by breaking it in thirds, you really have numbers 1 to 3 are your light values, 4, 5, and 6 are your midtones, and 7, 8, and 9 are your darks. So we're going to think about things in those 3 categories: lights, midtones, and darks. And when you look at a painting, or if you look out in the world and you see colors, sometimes it can be difficult to understand where do these values fit. But if we turn the painting to black and white, it is actually quite a bit easier. See how we can notice things so much easier, like these colors, you know, the light and the white are almost the same, or, you know, this value back here is almost the same as this. You know, as it starts to move this way, we can see that this is probably somewhere in this range, and this part of the hill is maybe this range here. So we can kind of start categorizing things into values. Down here in this roadway, we have much darker colors. It's down in the 7 and 8 range, and some of these fence posts, that might even be a 9. So we can kind of determine these things, but seeing it in color oftentimes makes it more confusing, because things like this color here, which is a bright yellowish orange, looks bright, but it's not the same as saying it is light. It's not the same value as the sky is over here, although it is a little bit lighter than the blue over here. But this blue, because it's bright, it's colorful, it can throw us off a little bit too. So knowing and understanding that we can look at things with a black and white version, and it can help us see, is going to enable us to potentially see the colors a little bit easier. So you can always use a phone, take a picture, turn the picture to black and white. But what we're going to do is we're going to paint a painting in black and white and establish the values, and then we're going to put color on top of that. And that is going to be an exercise for you in learning, okay, here's the value. Now let's work within those values and put colors on that are appropriate. Are you guys ready for this? It's going to be fun. It's going to be simple. It's going to be a building block for you that you can step forward with confidence. So let's jump into it. All right, in this lesson, we're going to paint a very simplified scene that actually is something kind of like this, where you have a beautiful evening and moon and reflection, but we're going to simplify it down to simply just 3 values. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's jump into it. We're going to use the same black and gray and white that we've been using. And we're going to do this in a couple stages. The first stage is we're going to take our gray and we're going to just cover the entire canvas. So again, if you need to mix up more, you do that before you even start, but you can just pause and come back. But it's going to simply be grabbing the gray and putting it over the entire canvas. There's no magic way of doing this. You can use a big brush for this, and your brush strokes aren't going to be you know, you can do anything. And I would just say observe the final effect of what you did. If you think, oh shoot, I wish I would have done more abstract, you know, just maybe change the brushstroke pattern a little bit. Next time you can do that. If you wish, oh, I wish I would have done all the brushstrokes in the same way, you can do that. For me, I'm just doing an abstract kind of, doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to cover the canvas with the gray paint. And now I'm going to dry it. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is put in the land. So I'm going to come down here and I'm simply going to mix or grab this black. And I've got a slightly smaller number 6 brush. What I want to do is create a straight edge across the bottom. That's going to be the bottom of the land. And we'll try to keep that as straight as we can because water is level. And at the top, we're going to make the land a shape. And again, we don't have to be, it doesn't have to be anything real detailed. If you wanted to put in some shapes of trees or something like that, you definitely can, but it's not necessary. I'll just change up the size of one side versus the other. And I'll put in a little bit of just thinking about making it a little bit bigger right here. Okay, and so we've got the bottom looks fairly level to me. And the top looks interesting enough. If you want to practice something like we did before and you want to try to make this top edge a little bit of a softer line, you could do a little bit of dry brushing. You could do a little bit of smudging if you want. Now this bottom line, it's okay to leave sharp, and either way, whether all of it's hard edge, it's totally fine. Now I'm going to dry that. Okay, now as I'm looking at this, I can see that some of this didn't get covered very well, so I'm just going to quickly come in and fill in that. Doesn't matter too much. And then I'm going to wash my brush out. And I'm going to grab the white. And this is going to be the highlight of the painting. I'm going to put a moon right in here. Just right here. Just kind of carefully making something that's pretty round. If you want to use a round brush, you can grab one of those, and that might make it a little bit easier. I'll just grab this right now and see, it's not that you don't necessarily put it down like a dot. That's not the way that the round brush works, but it might be a little bit smaller. You might be able to control it a little bit better. I'm not overly concerned that if it's not perfectly smooth or circular or something like that, but I'm just going to go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. Okay, and then we're going to come down here we're going to go directly underneath it. We're going to do a little bit of a reflection. And I'm just grabbing the white, I'm dragging it across. I'm kind of going back and forth just to create a little bit of a ripple effect. And I'm looking to see if I've lined it up, and I think it's okay. Maybe off a little bit, and I think I could also make it a little bit wider. So that's what I'm kind of doing. Coming in here, making it a little bit wider. And look at that. That's what painting is, really. We're working with three values, three main values. It's a value structure that's simple, but simple is often very good in art because you don't want to make things more complicated than they need to be. Oftentimes the simplest designs are the strongest designs. So there you guys go. It's a simple painting, but you've done it. And what a beautiful moonlit evening. And we're looking at this reflection over the land in the distance. So good job. There you go. Okay, so you finished the first part of that black and white painting. And before we add color to it, I just want to get out our colors and do a couple simple exercises that will get you more familiar with those colors. Okay, friends, it is time to think about color, and we've got a really simple exercise that we're going to do, looking at our palette, limiting the colors that we have, and then seeing how they can mix together to create beautiful and harmonious mixtures. And it's going to be fun because one of the things that I realize is that color doesn't have to be confusing. It can actually be kind of simple. So let's jump into it and have some fun. Okay, so here's my palette. I've got yellow, red, and blue, my three primary colors. And in between my yellow and my red, I can mix my orange. In between my red and my blue, I can mix my violet or purple. And in between my blue and my yellow, I can mix my green. And there will be variations, as one might be more towards blue-green, one might be more towards yellow, and it would be a yellow-green. I can add in white, and I have a lot of variety in here. But it's very nice to know that if you just are mixing between these colors, you can kind of keep track of where those mixes came from. I have black, I have titanium white, and this black could be substituted. Sometimes I might not have black. I might use a different color, and I could create my own blacks. But for simplicity's sake, we're just going to keep the black on there, and that is going to be our darkest value straight out of the tube. Of course, white is our lightest value straight out of the tube. And these colors all fall somewhere in between. And as we do mixes, we'll see if we turned the image to black and white, that you would see the way that it actually can relate to the grayscale values. Okay, so if we're trying to create a color in between, of course, very simply, we can just grab an equal amount or something that's close to an equal amount of the two colors, and we can go in between. But what you'll find is that oftentimes one of the colors is stronger than the other color. In this case, the red has it's a stronger tinting color than the yellow. So what you find is that you actually need more yellow than you have red to create an orange that's in between. If you just take an equal amount of red and yellow, it creates something that's more like a red orange. So you can use your brush or you can use a palette knife to do this, because I don't know if everybody has a palette knife. I'm just using my brush right now, but you can see that this mix now is actually pretty close to somewhere right in the middle. Like, that's a pretty good orange. It might have veered a tiny bit towards the yellow now, but it's pretty close to being in the middle. But we put in probably twice as much yellow as we did red. So that's just something to be aware of as you are mixing colors, that each color has a different mixing strength. And so you may need to add more of one color to make up for a weak mixing strength. But that doesn't mean that you can't make the color that you want. It just means you need to be aware and keep paying attention, and don't just fall into some formula like half and half will always work. It's just not always going to work like that. But you can continue to make these mixes. Grab some blue, grab some red, and we'll create a violet here. Now, sometimes, depending on the red that you have, depending on the blue that you have, the colors will be more, they'll be more vibrant, I guess you could say. And sometimes they'll be less vibrant. Like this right here, this mix, because of this red leans a little bit more towards orange. So you can see it mixed a pretty nice, vibrant orange, but it's going to mix a slightly dirtier purple. But that's okay. We're working within a limited palette, meaning we're only using a handful of colors right here. We've got our primary red, yellow, and blue, and we're mixing all the secondary colors out of those. So this is how you can set up, and you can see I grabbed a little bit more of the yellow again. There's more yellow than blue in this mix, because I'm assuming that it's going to take a little bit more yellow to mix up this green. And that's something pretty close. Again, these can be adjusted more if you want, and sometimes it's more obvious that they need it. But for me, I'm okay with it being somewhere in the middle like that. And that's essentially all you need. You actually don't even need to mix them all right off the bat, but sometimes it can be nice, it can be helpful to get those mixes happening so that you're one step closer to grabbing the color that you want as you do your painting. That's what we have in our palette. And if we want to create a gradation, so let's do the same type of idea that we did with the grays and the blacks and the whites, and we did this. So we know if we want to do the same type of idea, we can just work our way from one color to the other, right? So I could grab this yellow and I could start on this side, and I could begin to mix in more red, but essentially it's going to be more of this orange for a little while until I get to something that is directly in the middle, and it's just going to be the orange color here. So I'm getting pretty close to that, kind of like halfway in the middle. You can see now I'm going to start mixing in a little bit more red, and this mix will come further down toward the red. You can see it's getting more and more pure as it gets over here, and then finally it'll be just straight red. So you can see how quickly it kind of did change from yellow, which again, probably if I wanted to redo that, I could probably come back and mix a little bit more yellow in to make the gradation a little slower. But that's what happens when we're doing a gradation in color. Could we do that with our blue and our yellow and have the gradation between those? Yes, we can. Totally can. Just like this. Now, what I was going to show you also is that this value, like where does this value fall? It's probably somewhere in here, right? It's like this, even this yellow, it's not totally white, right? It's gonna be somewhere in this range. And we can see this better. You know, if we took a screenshot and we took and changed this color to a black and white, we would see it a lot easier. We'd see, oh yeah, this lines up right there. So this is probably closer to mid-tone. Now I'm telling you this because sometimes when you start mixing color can fool you. Color can make you think something is brighter or lighter in value or darker in value than it really is, just because the color itself is vibrant. So this color is vibrant, but it's still fairly dark. It's not way up here. It's somewhere in this range, right? Where it's actually kind of dark. And that matters as you get painting, because the way that your design works is largely due to the values and the way that the values of the painting work together. So if we start mixing in between the yellow and the blue, we're going to start adding in more blue, basically through this green that is here. So we get to the middle, where the green is, and then we'll start adding more blue, make it a blue-green. Oops, I picked up a little bit of the violet there. I was not really intending to do. And I'm not cleaning my brush right now. If I needed to get a totally pure color here, I will, you know, so like at the end, I'll probably take this, wipe this off, and then come back with one last brush stroke of the pure blue. And that's the transition, right? Between blue and yellow. So you can see it's not, I keep going over that for some reason. I just want to get a nice clean blue on there again, because I think I went over it too much, and my brush had a little bit too much of the.
Hey, if you haven't texted me yet this far in the video, do it right now. 425-400-2094. 425-400-2094. Tell me your name, your goal in your art, and I will do whatever I can to help you succeed. But I want to say right now, good job for making it this far. Let's jump back into it. You got a little bit more to go.
Green on it, and it kind of contaminated it. So, but anyways, you can see how these values, as it's going over some of this, it's actually doubling up, and you can see it was getting darker and darker in there. Where this is like showing through some of the white, and you can see the blue easier right there. So what you're painting over also influences the way that the colors work. Now, shall we do this final? Yeah, why not? Let's just do it. We'll go from red on this side, and we'll start mixing in a little bit of the blue by way of the violet that we have in the middle. And you can see that as this violet gets put on there, that's a pretty dark color, right? Like that's got some depth to it. And there you go. Bright and lots of saturation of the color. This is pretty saturated too, but this violet in the middle looks mostly just dark, and it's actually, if you could see what I'm looking at, you might notice that it has a brown tone also to it. It's not like a very vibrant purple. And that's just because this red, like I said earlier, it leans a little bit more towards orange. It kind of leans this way, and therefore when it mixes with this blue, it's going to make a more muted violet. But what's really great about that is that if I was to add some white to this color here, this is basically the in-between color. It's still going to look violet, but it's going to be just a softer kind of violet. And if I did the same thing and I just kind of worked my way toward these other colors, keeping it a little bit lighter, and to get an in-between color here, I made it a little bit too red. Okay. So keeping the value consistent here is the trick, because the white needs to be mixed in to keep it on the lighter side, more of a mid-tone. But you can see how pretty that is. Like, you add, this is straight up, I just mixed white with that, and that does not look colorful at all, but you see it down here and you actually realize, oh, it's not just black or, you know, just a dark. When you mix in that white, you can see the color easier. And that's where you get a lot of the beautiful, to me, some of the more beautiful colors is when you start mixing a little bit of white in and you start seeing that, oh, okay, as this, I couldn't see all the nuances of that before, but the white can show these beautiful, beautiful grays that we didn't notice before. So I'm going to try to go the other direction here. Trying to get that color the way place that it's supposed to be here. And I'll keep adding a little bit more blue in. Until we're pretty much just white and blue. But you can see, again, to me, these colors become so beautiful. And there's so many variations in here. And this is just a great exercise if you want to learn a little bit about color. You don't have to try with any more colors than your 3 primaries. If you mix a little bit of white in there, you'll get it to be like that. If you mix a little bit of black in there, it also will affect it. It's harder to see, but you can create these beautiful dark colors by mixing in a little bit of black. And what also I love to do is mix in a little bit of white and black, and you'll make this slightly more of a gray, but it's just going to be a beautiful neutral. And it's just fascinating to me. Color is always fascinating. I never get bored of it. It's like you could play with color for the rest of your life, and I feel like you would never run out of something interesting to discover, because it's just there's so many pieces to it, so many parts to it, and it's just absolutely fascinating. But you can see these are way more gray, but they're still colorful and like just absolutely beautiful. So this is kind of the magic of learning the simplified limited palette, is that you can create all these colors, and what is so great about it is that they will work together because they're born out of the same family. They're born out of the same red, yellow, and blue, and therefore they are related. And in your painting, you will realize that they're related, and you'll realize that they all work together. And that's the secret of so many artists, is that why do their paintings work together when other artists, like you look at it and you're like, yeah, it's colorful, there's lots of color, but there's something that doesn't really work in the painting. Well, part of it could be that they're using lots and lots of individual colors from tubes, and that can make a very colorful painting, but it won't make a painting that ties in together. And these colors, as different as they all are made out of the same primaries, and they all work together because of that. And that's a really wonderful lesson to store away in the back of your mind and get yourself acquainted with your limited palette. And you can switch out some of these blue, you can have a different blue and try that out and see what happens. But understanding that you have the ability to create colors that are quite diverse, but they will still be tied together. That's one of the great joys of the limited palette, and I'm happy to be able to share it with you. Okay, so we're ready to put color on top of this, and simply it's lights here, midtones here, and darks here. And if you remember, when we think about lights, midtones, and darks, there is a little bit of a range. So we go from 1 to 3 in lights, 4 to 6 in midtones, and 7, 8, and 9 are all darks. So when we're looking at this little image, we can have a bit of variety in here. It can go from 4, 5, or 6 in that value scale, and this can go from 7, 8, 9, and this can go from 1, 2, or 3. So there is a little bit of variation that we can have in here, but we know that it's simply just broken up into those 3 categories. So I have my colors here mixed out, and the white, of course, is going to be the darkest, the lightest color that I have possible. I actually have black here. And then these are my primary colors, of course, with the mixtures in the middle. So we already have, our gray and our black on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be looking to see where can I find a really dark color that I can put over the top, and maybe make some variation in there, and then do the same thing. What color would look good up in the sky and in the reflection down in the water? And then should we use pure white, or should we add any kind of color to that or not? Those are the decisions that you can make, and there's no right or wrong way. We really could paint this scene in a number of different ways, and it could still all look very interesting and good. So I'm going to get started just thinking about this. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this area first. And I'm thinking just for the idea of a night sky, I'm going to use some blue. I'm going to mix in a tiny bit of this violet, just a little bit, but then I got to mix in some white because it's going to be a little bit dark if I don't do that. I can put down a little bit and we can see. See, right now, that's a pretty good value to cover this because you can hardly see it. You know, it's almost the exact value. So I'm going to put this down, and I think that I'm going to put down a color here and make it slightly darker as it goes away from the moon. Just for fun. Not for any real reason, just because sometimes that does happen with something like the moon and you're looking at it. But you don't have to do that. I'm just adding a little bit more, tiny bit more blue. And I'm just kind of trying to keep the same contour of the hill, but I'm not too worried about it. If it changes it a little bit, that's okay. I'm going to paint the hill again. But there we have the idea of the hill and the sky behind it, and thinking I'm also probably might as well just come in here and do this water at the same time. We'll just come, and I'm not going to go all the way over because I'm going to get a slightly lighter color for right there. Just a slight bit of white in here. And then come right over the top of that just a little bit. Okay, so I haven't even really done anything on the white yet, and I don't know, I might not need to, you know, but it's time to try the dark. So let's get like the darkest color that I have here is probably this violet. And again, we can go kind of like on the value scale from a 7 to a 9, so it doesn't need to be the darkest thing that we can imagine, and we can have it be a little bit lighter than this, maybe a little bit more colorful. So I'm mixing a little bit of blue and a tiny little bit of white in here, and it's not going to do too much, and it's probably won't even show up. I might just make it, I exaggerate it a little bit so you can see it on your screen, just because if I don't, you won't even know that I put any color on there because you can't see it very well. It's so dark. So let's see. I'm trying to exaggerate it enough. Okay, maybe you can see that a little bit. Hopefully you can, because I don't think I'll make it any lighter. That's the dark color. Add some more of the violet and blue in. Deepen it up a little bit more as it goes away from the moon. Down into bottom part of the hill. And if we wanted to show a little bit of profile or anything like that, I mean, you definitely could come through and, you know, try to add a little bit of, you know, texture, like maybe there's a little bit of sunlight, or I mean moonlight hitting in here. I'm also thinking if I was to change anything, I'd probably make the hill just a little bit more blue so that it blends in a little bit more with the sky potentially. You can see kind of what I was imagining, maybe to add in just a little bit of texture with the kind of like thinking about, I wonder if we could see a little bit of that moon touching the tops of trees, which probably isn't that realistic now that I think about it, just thinking about where the moon is and everything. But the main point I'm trying to show you is that you can have some variety in there and it can provide maybe a little bit more texture. But this is, you know, colored. It's got some color on there, but we're maintaining the same basic value structure of it, which of course this is a very simple scene, and that's kind of easy in this. But the idea is here, right? Now I'm just adding a tiny bit of yellow to the moon, or to this white, which will become the moon color. Again, I don't want to do too much because oh man, you can't see that probably again, but it is there, guys. It is, believe me. And it's simple. There's not a whole lot of color in this, but really, like I was saying, we could make up anything. We could paint the sky green if we wanted, and as long as we keep the values close to what that original structure was, if we think that the design of the original one was a good one, we will have a good design in the end, because the values are really what make up the essence of the painting. The colors add and they contribute and they're important, but a lot of times we think that they're more important than the values. We might not even think about the values, but the dark and the light and the mid-tone, and that's what makes up the structure of the painting. And so that's why I wanted to share this with you and give you this simple exercise so that you could see exactly what I mean when I say that every color has a corresponding value. And like we did here, you did a good job of putting on those colors and establishing and keeping the values. So great job. We'll move on to the next lesson. Okay, for this lesson, we're going to use our yellow, our red, the orange that we have mixed in between them, and black, and maybe just a tiny little bit of white. But we don't really need anything from the blue. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint a sunset, and I'm going to grab my yellow, and I'm going to leave this area down here for just a little bit of land. But I'm going to start with the sunset coming across right here. So this pure yellow. We're not going to be doing too much mixing of colors. We'll do a little bit of dry brush as we transition. This is a simpler way of doing this without, getting into mixing a lot of colors. But I am going to grab now the orange. And so this orange is going to come in next, and it's going to come right back into this. And we're just going to carry on with a little bit, like this is what I'm saying with the dry brush. We're not really mixing the colors together, but they are mixing a little bit on the canvas here. So you can see just some dry brush edge.
Here's what I found.
And my watch talking to me. And then we're going to do the same thing. I'm grabbed the red and I'm going to come right back down into the orange. So we're getting this little bit of a transition up into the sky, but it's not a lot of mixing of colors. We're just letting the colors kind of be, and then a small bit of dry brushing where they meet. And you can see though, wow, just even that is giving us the impression of a sunset. Now the lighter color down here and moving up into a very fiery red sky. Like they say, red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky at night. I mean, you could probably think of a lot of different types of people that delight in a beautiful sunset like this. And now we are at the foreground. So I think you could paint pretty much whatever you want in the foreground, but we're gonna just grab black. We're keeping this scene very simple. So first of all, I'm gonna cover up this foreground area, and it's just gonna be black all the way across. Again, this is just where we're starting. We have all the opportunity after this to add more, to do something different. But right now we're just getting this kind of scene just like this. Now, if you wanted to add a tree or a house, or, you know, like you could add almost whatever you want in here. And I haven't actually decided what I'm going to do because I didn't think about it too long. I guess I just was, you know, thinking whatever the foreground is, it's going to be dark and it's going to work with this scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually paint a tree. I'm going to come up into this sky and I'm going to try to create a tree that's just a little bit interesting and will provide a bit of a silhouette for us to see through as we're looking at the sunset. So I know that I want the tree to be an interesting shape, and so I'm just going to come in with some brush marks. Kind of like this, and we'll come up here maybe like this, and we'll come over and we'll do a little bit of different. You can shape this however you really want, right? There's not any predetermined rule here. All we're doing is coming up into this and imagining where we would see branches. And you know, you can get really complicated in this, or you can leave it more simple. There are lots and lots of little branches that can come up here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and start doing some more what I call dry brushing again. And I'm going to add some leaves, and I'm going to be doing this with the effect of trying to make it look like these leaves are not, they're not the same as the branches. Branches are more solid, but the leaves are, you know, they're smaller. So we can define a couple of them, like we can come down and we can define some and make a few distinct marks if we want, but we can also leave some, you know, I'm just pulling a little bit of the paint off with each brush stroke, but not like a big glob of paint. It's just a little bit here and there. And it's kind of creating a softer effect, right? And there's going to be places where we'll just kind of cover up more because there's going to be, we can just imagine it's more full, the branches are more full and the leaves are more full. But around the edges is where we want to think about the dry brushing the most. Where are we going to see some of these maybe more distinct tree leaves and be able to show that we can see through some of this a little bit. Okay, so it could be something kind of like this. If you wanted to keep working on that, you can, you know, probably do a better job of shaping the tree leaves. But I think in general, I like the feel of this. I like the way that it's kind of working, and it all kind of makes sense. Now, if we want to add some grass or something like that, we're definitely welcome to. You're welcome to. But the last thing that I kind of want to add, as I'm thinking about this, is I'm thinking about adding in a small little sun and just showing that the sun is actually going to be a little bit lighter, whiter. So where do we want to put it? I think we could put it over here, and it could kind of offset this larger tree. We could put it somewhere close to the tree, but I'm thinking over here will probably make the most sense. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to just put in this little sun. And there you have it. Now the other thing that I would do, probably just if it was me, is I'd probably do a little bit of a dry brush across the very, very top of at least some of this land, just to make it be a little bit softer so that our eye is going to be drawn more towards the tree and what's happening over there with the harder edges. So there you go. Simple sunset gradation without doing a lot of blending. It was just the yellow, the orange, and the red with some dry brushing in between. Then we painted the tree on top. We did more dry brushing to make it appear like they're leaves that we can kind of see through every once in a while. And then we shaped an interesting trunk and did a tiny bit of dry brushing here and added the sun. Guys, thank you for being here. I hope this was fun for you. We'll see you next time. All right, in this demonstration, we're going to look at painting some flowers, some roses specifically, and this might be a little bit more complicated, but it's going to be a fun painting, I believe. And I'm going to show you a little bit about painting with thinner washes at the beginning and then putting some thicker paint over the top. And so we're going to use some water, and I'm going to draw on the scene a little bit, or the flowers, with a pencil. So hopefully it'll be helpful for you to see yet another way that acrylic paints can be used that is, you know, just a little different, a little bit more like a watercolor effect at the first, and then a little bit more with the opaque and thicker paint at the end. So you have a lot of versatility here, and hopefully it'll be really helpful for you. Let's jump into it. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to use a pencil to kind of sketch in the main thing. And so I have this idea of just some stems coming up, something like this. And you can see kind of the back side of this rose, and you know, we don't have to get everything perfect here, because really what I want to show you has less to do with perfect roses and has more to do with the effect of painting a particular way. So we'll just play with color and have some fun. And this is just some, plants, the green parts of different plants and other things back here. And we'll see. I'm not 100% sure, but usually on a surface, you can put down some water and it may or may not soak into this a ton, depends on what the surface is, but it usually will allow you to do some lighter washes that can apply some thinner paints, and it can help keep the paint wet for a little bit longer. And sometimes that can be helpful as you are trying to keep soft edges and things like that. Now, just realizing that I do need a little bit more white on my palette here. Okay, here we go. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some water. I'm just going to come over this. Now, sometimes this can take off your pencil marks if you rub really vigorously or something like that. So I'm kind of paying attention. It doesn't seem like it's taking it off of this surface. Now again, I'm using this canvas paper right now here. It's very inexpensive and it seems like it's been working pretty good so far. Now that paper is saturated, it's probably going to buckle a tiny bit. But what I'm going to do is I still have a tiny bit of water on my brush. Don't need really to have much water on there. Because there's water already in the scene on the paper. But you can see if we come in, oh, I got a little bit down here where I didn't really want it. And it's staining the paper. So that's okay. We're learning. And it's okay to put a little bit where we don't want it, because we can come back and fix that. I'm just thinking that I might try to get it a little bit wet again. Oh, I can see something that's happening here with this type of paper is it's actually pulling up, and it's pulling up a little bit of it, so it's pulling up a little bit of gritty something in it, but it's okay. We're just gonna keep moving. We realize that certain materials have certain limitations, and that's okay. Now I'm gonna mix in a bit of lighter value, lighter white into my mix here, and so this is just kind of mixing on the canvas right now, right in front of us. And I'm just putting in a few marks to hopefully, show maybe some of the leaves or the petals of the rose, but nothing too crazy about it. It's all still wet in there. And really that's what we're looking at, is making a few marks here that can help, just show a little bit of what we're looking at. Okay, so I got some color in there for that. Now, while I have this really light color on my brush, I'm gonna come down here and I'm just gonna act like I can see maybe a couple other roses in the background. They're just gonna be really light, but just a little bit of that color. And you can kind of see it's still a little bit wet, but it's starting to dry out a little bit here. So I'm gonna get a tiny bit smaller brush. This is just another smaller flat brush. And I've got some darker colors here that I can mix together. I got my blue, I've got this violet mix. And I'm gonna just grab a little bit of green into it. And I'm just gonna come up here and we're gonna create the bottom side of this. You know how you can kind of see the stem come up into the underside of a flower? That's what this is. It's just these parts where you would see a little bit of that stem. And there's kind of like two flowers here. A lot of this is just to make it kind of interesting. But there you go. You can, yours doesn't have to be perfect, or there's nothing perfect about my painting. We're just having fun, just going. But I'm just kind of putting in a few stems. I'm going to put a couple back here also. Tie in, we got that small. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. I'm actually going to mix in some more green. And then we'll just come in. Remember how we can smudge with our fingers if we want to make a softer edge. We're just coming in. It's giving the impression of something back there. And then finally, I'm going to grab some more of the green, a little bit more blue, and a tiny bit of white. I want this color to have a little bit more of a blue-green, but not be super, super dark. And I'm going to come down here, and this is going to be my darker part here. And then I'm just going to put in a little bit this dark, and then I'm going to lighten it more. And I'm going to add a little bit more of the green to it. Now, it's getting a little bit dry. I have a spray bottle, and I could spray it with that, but I don't know if you have a spray bottle, so I'm not going to do that. I'll just come back with another brush that has a little bit of, just dipped it in a little bit of water. And you can see how by coming back with just a little bit of water, I can come soft in some of those edges. I can do a few things. You can see it kind of picking up some of the paper texture, that kind of thing. I can actually mix in a little bit of yellow because I really want to get some of this to feel kind of light. And a big part of this is really just working on keeping it soft. And you can slow this down if you want to stop, go back, look at any part in particular. The main thing is just to have fun. And I'm working fast because we have a wet kind of surface that we're trying to use to create these softer passages of paint. And I'm also going to start, just continue to make some of these places lighter, a little bit lighter. So I'm going to clean out my brush. I'm going to dry it off. Still got a little bit of color on it, but what I want to do is I want to grab my white, I want to mix it in here, and I just want to create a lighter and lighter version of this light green color. So as it comes up, I think it could be quite nice. This area here, like all this red really isn't even meant to be there. So that was where I just kind of accidentally put a big mark. But we can have some variety in here, but I want to fill in a little bit more. And this is where this is a fun technique. I call it negative painting. It's where we have a stem, but I'm going to paint around it, and I can shape it just a little bit if I want also. I don't need to shape too much in here right now, but we will come So I'm going to get a little bit lighter still, just a little more white into this mix. And I'm going to come up a little bit higher up here, because there are going to be some places that I think it'll make sense to do some of this shaping of the roses as they're up a little more. But what we're going to actually use for some of the shaping as we go is pure white. Not even going to mix it with anything. We're just going to make it a pure white. It's going to be really clean, and I think it'll look quite nice. So just, this is such a light color that I have here. I've got, you know, this pure white mixed in with just a little bit of the green. Sometimes it's a little darker than others, but it's still a very light feel to it. Okay, I'm gonna wash my brush one more time. I'm gonna try to clean it off a little bit better than I did last time. And then I'm gonna see that's pretty clean right there now. So what I wanna do is grab pure white. And this is very clean color. But what's so cool about acrylics is that we can really bring some definition to some of these shapes. And it's the kind of thing that we've got a really nice soft feel to this painting, so we don't want to lose that. But when you're painting, one thing that I always like is to have a combination of soft edges and then a few places where it's a little bit more crisp, a little bit more defined. And when you want to draw somebody's eye to what you could call the focal point in a painting, to have a contrast between the light and the dark and having a sharp edge, that's going to draw the eye, especially when there are a lot of soft edges in the rest of the painting. So that's something to remember as you move forward and as you keep painting on your own, you know, as you learn, is the contrast and the edges is a very important part of the puzzle of creating a painting that's fun to look at, because you can kind of direct somebody's eye to a part of the painting that you want them to look. And so you want to be thoughtful about, where is my lightest light in a painting, where is my darkest dark, and where are the edges that have the most contrast. Those are the places that will grab attention. Okay, now we can bring this white and we can go all over, you know, we can come down a little ways. It can be a little bit thicker. And you can kind of make some of this up. I'm just trying to shape it in a way that I think will look pleasing. But I also wouldn't mind getting some softer edges in here again, so we can come through with our fingers like this and do some that way. We can work back and forth. I could get out the pink. I could create a really nice soft pink again. I could do some of the edges that way. What I love about this, and I love about painting, is that you can come back to your painting and you can make changes. Especially with acrylics, it's such a nice medium to work with, and your changes can be So quick and easy. Okay, so I'm going to do what I was just saying. I'm going to grab a bit of the red and mix in just a little bit of the white again. Try to create some really soft, nuanced pinks. Some soft colors here. And see how this is a more nuanced painting really than we've done, but it's not always super complicated to get there. Like really, in some ways, it's just about learning, you know, some of the soft edges, some of the things that we're going through, and then putting those pieces together in a painting. And like I said, I know it can be kind of tricky and kind of hard to know how much should I do in a painting, how much detail do I put in. One of my thoughts is like that it's very personal. If you really like to get a lot of detail in, then you might keep going on it. But I think sometimes for me, what I like is a suggestion of the subject, not defining everything to the greatest detail, but just suggesting things. And so for me, I look at this and I think, it's simple, it's beautiful. I had fun painting it. There's some nice colors, there's some nice neutral areas, and this is just a small example of the kind of variety that you can have. You can have some thinner places where it's thinned down with a little bit of water. There's soft edges. There's more opaque passages, but that are also very light. And, you know, it's this kind of mix of a lot of white with a little bit of the green that kind of is a gradual transition up. There's a few places where we have some greater contrast with the color and also some harder edges. And we look at those places, we see them, we recognize that they're places that draw our eye. And if I was, wanting to look at this right now, I would say like one thing that I would probably change is right here. I have a little bit of a sharp edge, but I probably want this to be my area of the greatest contrast and the most like interest. So if I come back over here to this other one and I just kind of soften some of the edge around that, it's actually going to help make that stand out a little bit less and be.
If you're here with me right now, it means you're one of the 1%ers. You made it through the whole video. I'm so proud of you. That is awesome. And I want you to text me. Now this time I want you to text me and I want you to say, I made it through the entire beginner course on YouTube. Tell me that, man. And tell me, hey Jed, give me the special deal that you're telling me I can get if I did this whole thing, okay? Text me right now, 425-400-2094, 425-400-2094, and tell me that you finished this video, and I got a special offer for you.
Be second to this harder edge over there. So anyways, this was so fun. Thank you for being here, and I know that you have turned out an amazing painting. As long as you just had fun, it doesn't matter what the end result really looks like. You learned something and you're going to be able to take what you learned and move forward. But you've got some soft edges, you've got some contrast and some harder edges, and you learned something great about the way that acrylics work. So thanks for being here. and we'll see you next time.